Okay, welcome back to something quite different than what we've been working on. It's not difficult, but it is quite a bit different. Okay, so here we go. You can see what I've done is I've taken the fake data that I've had and I've cut it down, so I've only got 5 things. That's more than enough for us to get started. But I'll be back in a little bit and we'll make this really, really big. Okay, just so I can prove why you'd want to possibly do this, or at least a second reason about why you'd want to do this. Okay, so all that I've done is I'm simply calling this fake data, so I get back to value, just console.logged it just to make sure I've got everything appearing as expected. And you can see what I've got is I've just got an array of objects. I don't even have any types. Okay, but this whole thing would be about the same idea even if you had actual classes. Okay, so here we go back to Visual Code Studio, and let's do a couple of things. All right, now first of all, you know very well that this happens to be an array, so you can ask for indexes like index number 1. And of course, what index number 1 would give you, this would give this Christy Atley person. Okay, so that's exactly it. And of course, if you ask for something that's too big like this, you get an undefined. Okay, but otherwise, this is the way how an array works, and that has been our main storage mechanism that we've been using for hanging on to things. Okay, especially if you have a lot of things, adding these things in so that you have a bunch of individual indexes. Okay, what I want to do is I want to introduce a new concept that we haven't bumped into before. Perhaps this was covered in Python, but I'm not sure. So I'm actually going to cover this as well here. Okay, and the concept is something called a map. Okay, so T is the fake data. Now you got to remember, T is actually an array full of things. And what I'm going to have is I'm going to have the actual customer list. Instead of being an array, this time I'm going to say it's a new map. Okay, so what? Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to recreate exactly the same information, but I'm going to recreate it in a very different way. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my customer list, and instead of saying customer list.push something, I'm going to say customer set, and here's what I'm going to do. Okay, first of all, this is the actual object I want to put inside here. Okay, the word set takes 2 parameters. In fact, just a second, I'll get rid of this. The first parameter is something called a key. The other thing is called a value. All right, and this is why I'm wondering, maybe this was covered in CP 2040. I'm just not sure. Okay, so what this is called a key value pair. Okay, now if we take a look at this object, this is the actual value that I'm interested in storing. What is the key? Oh, well, guess what? The key is not that much different than, say, what you'd bump into in CP 3450, the database course. This certainly looks like it's a key, so you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this over here. This is going to be the key for my object. Okay, and, well, you know what? I'm going to do exactly the same thing over and over again for all of these values. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to leave this up here because I've got some work I'm going to come back to do a little bit later. And sorry, I've got a little bit of copying and pasting because I just want to get all of this put together first. So please bear with me while I get all of this stuff put in. You see, this is not the value for this one. It happens to be this. This is not the key. But this one right here happens to be the key. All right, finally, okay, copy this one. This becomes the key. And this thing right here, this also becomes the key. Oops. Copy, not paste. Okay, and sorry, got a couple of other things. We had to just put the closing parentheses on the end of these. Okay, so there we go. So now, what my customer list has, it has a bunch of things that have been set. Well, you know what? Let's take a peek and see what's inside the console.log. So let's take a look at customer list and see what's in there. Okay, well, look at this. It looks like there's some stuff here other than it says map, and you can see at least the keys when I show it this way, and you can see that this key happens to refer to an object, and if you click on the object, you can see that the actual value is here as well. So yes, it looks like the key value is actually replaced twice because it shows up here as the key. It's also the customer ID. So could have I gotten rid of this and I could have had just the first name and last name? The answer is yes, I could have, but I thought I would just leave it in here. Okay, now the reason why I've done this, okay, is be able to do things like this. Remember when we had this array up here, if you wanted to find something, you could use t.find, and you could give c, and you could say c's CID is equal to some value, and that would find exactly that one object. Okay. Down here, if you actually want to find a particular result of something, so we'll call it res, inside a customer list, what you do is you say the name of the variable customer list, and you use the operation called get. Okay, and what goes into the get parameter is the key. For example, if I take this, I could paste this in, and that would give me exactly that result. So here it's console.log res. Okay, nothing else is being printed, it's only this. Let's go over here and load it, and you can see that gave me exactly that person. Okay, and you could try some different things. Let's try one that isn't there to see what happens. Okay, it comes back as undefined. Alright, now, you might be looking at this saying, okay, well, fine, that doesn't look that much more powerful than, say, an array of data. Okay, and in some ways, in these small cases, you're exactly right, it doesn't look that much different. Okay, but let me now go through and actually try to make this a little bit more interesting, so at least you understand why you would do this. Because really, getting something versus calling find, that hardly looks any different. In fact, this get looks like it might be less powerful than the find, because the find you could find anything, and that, by the way, is true. You could use find to get people with certain names, but when it comes down to getting things with key values, this is definitely the way that you want to go. Okay, it's exactly the same reason why in the world of databases you want to be searching on indexes. You're guaranteed to have exactly one, so there's no question about if you're getting the first one, the next one, or the fifth one. You're always getting the one and only, or else you're getting absolutely nothing. Okay, so here's what I want to do. To make this interesting, I'm going to take my customer list new map, and I'm going to throw it away for a second, and I'm going to head back to Mockaroo because I got a small example that I'd like to generate. Okay, now here's the first thing I'm going to do is I would be interested in a whole lot of these, basically as many as I could. If I get 100,000, I would do that right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to download 1,000 of these JSON formatted objects, and you can see that this whole thing's being downloaded here. And let me get over to, this is where I will want to put this. Get another Finder window. Okay, and let's go over here to the downloads. Here's my actual data. Let me put it into here, and let's take a look at it inside here. Okay, so you see what I've got is I've got a whole pile of stuff. Okay, so there's quite a few of these this time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this entire thing. I'm going to go back to here, and instead of this few lines, I'm going to paste in 1,000. So now I've got a lot of stuff. Okay, so there's a lot of data. Okay, so right down here, and I'm going to start off by calling this, maybe we'll just call this the cust data. Okay, is fake data, and just give me 1 second. I'd like to do a console.log on cust data just so I can see whether or not this is working. Back over to here, let's reload it. So here we go. Yes, I've got myself 1,000 of these things. Okay, and here's a whole pile of them in here for the 400s. That's exactly what I'm looking for. All right, now what I want to do is I want to show you what it would be like to go through and find things. Okay, so in order to find something, so we'll call it result, how do you get this? Well, it's quite simple. You go to cust data and you use the word find, and you have a customer and you say C's CID. We're looking for exactly equal to something. Okay, so which one? Well, I don't really know, but let's maybe pick this one right here. Okay, so we'll use this one right here. Okay, so that's fine. And let's just do a console.log res, and we'll just load it just to make sure that we're actually getting back the first one. Okay, that's exactly what we're looking for. And now I want to do something, because take a look at this. How much time does this take to load? Okay, there it was loaded. Let me hit it again so you can actually see it. Okay, you see? It's loaded instantly. This is not particularly interesting because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to prove a point. And unfortunately, if things are happening instantaneously, it doesn't look like there's any significant problem about using these find methods. So instead, let me make this a little bit more interesting. Let me have a counter which starts off at 0, and I say, well, count is less than 100,000. 1 million, we'll start with 100,000, count plus plus. And what I'm going to do is, you definitely don't want to print this out. Okay, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to get the value, and I'm going to not console.log it. I'm just going to get this. So what I'm doing is I'm looking this value up 100,000 times. Okay, so how fast does this go? Okay, so it looks like it goes pretty quick. Just a second. We have absolutely no idea how long that took because I forgot I need to have something in here. So the console.log, done. Okay, over here, let's load it. Okay, well, that still seems pretty quick. I mean, it looks like it's taken a little bit more time. I suppose we could always add an extra value and say, let's look for it 1,000,000 times, see if it's any better. Okay, well, that's not too bad. That's a pretty reasonable indication that this is obviously quite a bit slower. In fact, that almost negates one of the things I was going to do. But you know what? I'm going to cover it anyway. Just in case you ever have any reason to try this, there's some stuff built into JavaScript called performance. And what you can do is you can mark starting points. That actually is a name you can use, any name at all. You can mark the end point. So I'm going to call it mark end or stop. Okay, and what I'm going to ask for is performance.measure, and we're going to say loop between start and end. Okay, so the final thing that I'm going to do here at the end is I'm just going to say console.log performance.get entries. Okay, and we're looking for the things called measure. Okay, so let's go over here and load this up so you can see what the measurement looks like. I can execute measure end. Did I say end? That should be stop. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, perfect. And now if we take a look at what's inside the performance area, you can see that there's a bunch of timing things that were done. And I would say we're probably really interested in this thing right here called performance measure. And you can see that it gives the number of 1,798. What this is milliseconds. So in other words, this was about almost a full 2 seconds. And yeah, if you think about how long it took, that's pretty close to 2 seconds. Okay, so you see, okay, it says 1,796. Okay, let's load it again a second or third time. 1,791. So you know you're never going to get exactly the same number twice because it depends on what other things are running on the browser. Like I've got this timer running here, Outlook is running here, so that could be using a little bit of time. Yes, even Facebook may be stealing a bit of time. So as a result, you'll get slightly different things, but this is pretty consistent. It's like 1.7, 1.8 seconds to load to be able to find that value 1,000,000 times. I mean, we ended up not even doing anything with it. We were just looking to find the value, and that was it. Okay, so now that is our first piece. Okay, so that gives you an idea. And what I want to do is I want to make a bunch of changes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out just so I've still got it here in case you want to get a snapshot of this later and actually try. But what I'm going to do is before I start measuring, I'm going to have something called a customer map. And guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new map. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for all of the customers of the customer data. Okay, I'm going to do something with it. Okay, so remember what this is. This is an array. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to customer map and I'm going to set CID, that is the key, and then C. And all that I'm going to do is I'm just going to say console.log cust map so we can see whether or not we've actually got all the customers. Ignore all this other stuff for a second. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Here's the map, and you can see that, yes, we've got a bunch of maps, the keys pointing off to the actual values that they match with. Okay, now, the reason why I've done this is because I would like to come in here. Okay, so once this is done, I'm going to start some performance measurements, and rather than going through 1,000,000 times using customer find, I am going to look up the actual value. Okay, using a map. So I'm not so much interested in the customer data this time. I'm interested in cust map get, and I'm going to look for this key value right here. Okay, so notice I'm still doing this 1,000,000 times. Okay, I'm measuring before, I'm measuring afterwards, and let's take a look and see whether or not this ended up being a little bit quicker than, say, 1.7 seconds. Okay, that's what we're hoping for. Let's go load it and see. Okay, so did it actually work? Because it seemed to happen like completely instantly. All right, let's take a look and take a look at the performance measure. See this? 3 milliseconds. Okay, did you see a difference between the two? Yes, there's a significant difference between searching an array using a find versus looking something up in a map. These maps, by the way, are almost completely instant. Okay, they're very, very close to being instantaneous. In fact, when you mark something in a database as being a primary key, this is well, I won't say it's exactly what goes on, but most database implementations are using something very, very similar to this. Okay, they're using something called hash maps to be able to map values from keys into values almost directly, very, very close to being instant. In fact, even if I increase the size of my data quite a bit, you're probably going to find that this still is very, very quick. This is completely a different situation than, say, having an array of data. So remember, the array of data was about 2 seconds to look up these 1 million things, and this was about just a few milliseconds. So why would you care if something takes a couple of milliseconds versus a couple of thousand seconds? Well, remember that if you're trying to show a game, you have about 16 milliseconds between screen updates. If you're searched to find out whether or not a shot that you fired hit some object, you want to be able to find out very quickly. You don't want to have to take 2 or 3 seconds to go through a whole pile of things. You want to be able to get this in. You want to be able to get this information very, very quickly. Okay, so you can see even with this absolutely gargantuous sized pile of data, we can still find things very, very quickly. Okay, so as long as we can prove that yes, it is actually working, and trust me, it is actually working, it is quite a bit faster. Okay, so here we go. Back over to here, I'm going to ask you to do some more work again. So when the video is complete, so this is the end of the video we're going to cover here, what I want you to do is to refactor your local customer management system to use a map instead of an array. Okay, so what's going to have to change? All right, let's go back here, take a look at it for a second. First of all, you can leave your fake data exactly as is. Okay, the customer is still exactly the same. The constructor is different. Okay, guess what? It's not an array, it's a map. Loading the data is going to be different. You don't want to push the customer list. You don't want to push the customer into the customer list. Entry allowed, yes, it is no longer a find. Okay, and get details is no longer a find. It's now, both of these will be gets. Okay, so there's where we'll leave this off. So that I will be leaving for you as an exercise. Okay, so that could actually end up using up, say, the first full 2 hours of this week. If you have time, you can carry on with the next video. If not, come back tomorrow and carry on with the next part. Okay, so I promise the next one's a little bit short.